Okay, I've gone live now, so it should come on. So. Well, it turns the microphones on. So. Is that an old school phone or?
No.
Might 20 seconds. Yeah, I'm going to wait to switch it on. You can stay there. I mean, that's what I mean. It's coming off it.
Wow.
The sound on switched on now? And you're switching the sound on when you go up? Yeah.
It's about the sound on that.